Growing your own food can be so rewarding, but there's definitely some mistakes that can be made. So here's 5 mistakes that first-time gardeners make. Number 1, don't direct seed everything. While there are certainly things like beans and radishes that really prefer to be direct seeded, things like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant hate it. And all too often, we see these things constantly being direct seeded and people being discouraged because they have such poor success with it. We've even seen some people have success transplanting crops that have traditionally been direct seeded, like corn and beets. A good bit of advice, especially if you don't have an irrigation system, is when in doubt, transplant. Number 2, you've got to quit overwatering. All too many times I get messages from people asking, why are my plants declining? Why are my plants turning yellow? And when they send me a picture, I immediately notice how saturated their soil is. So every time you go to water, what you should do is dig approximately 3 inches down and actually feel your soil. If it's wet to the touch, don't water. If it's bone dry, give it a good soaking. This, of course, can vary by crop depending on their water needs. And of course, if you've just direct seeded something, you're gonna wanna make sure to keep that ground as wet as possible. Number 3, you've gotta stop planting everything at one time. I've seen it time and time again. Individuals get so excited to get out and get their hands dirty, and they got all their seeds lined up and they throw everything in the ground at one time. And 6 to 8 weeks, even 90 days later, they pick everything and then they replant everything. And they have this wide gap in time of no harvest. And so sure, on things like tomatoes, if you're growing an indeterminate tomato, you would only plant one time throughout the season. But things that are cut and done, as I call it, like lettuce, bok choy, you're gonna wanna continuously plant, even in weekly intervals, so you can harvest in weekly intervals. The best thing to do to keep track of this is create a planting schedule and put the reminders in your phone. Number 4, sunlight is one of those things that you have to grow most of your garden plants. And so knowing how many hours of sunlight you get, where you're planning on growing, is really important. We've seen it before where someone will build a beautiful raised bed garden. They get it completely planted out, only to realize that everything grows very, very slow, or maybe doesn't grow at all. They do a sun survey, and lo and behold, they only get 3 to 4 hours of sun. And a sun survey is really easy to do. All you're going to need is something to mark several spots. An irrigation flag works really well. I don't have one, so I'm literally just gonna use a dirty towel and a couple of sticks. So what you're gonna wanna do is, as soon as the sun comes up, go ahead and place your stick with your dirty rag to identify that it's your first spot, or your irrigation flag with the time noted on it, as soon as the sun hits your growing space. So if you're in a backyard, or maybe you're around some trees trying to measure it, you're gonna wanna catch it as soon as the sun comes up, and the first spot of light that hits, go ahead and put your first marker. You're then gonna wanna come out every hour on the hour. If your space of sun has extended, go ahead and put another flag. Your first flag should have been marked with 7 o'clock. You'll now mark it with 8 o'clock. Your second flag, where the new sunlight is, should also be marked with 8 o'clock. You'll come out the next hour and you'll mark where the new light is. That third point will be marked with 9 o'clock. The second point will be marked with 8 and 9 o'clock. Your third point will be marked with 7, 8, and 9 o'clock. You'll continue to do this throughout the day. If there's a point in the middle of any of your points that gets shade, maybe from a tree or a fence or even your house, then what I like to do is create 2 points where the shade starts and stops and just label that shade. By the end of the day, you'll know everywhere in your growing space that has sunlight and how many hours of sunlight it has. And you can even create as many points in your growing space as you'd like. If you already have an idea of where you want your garden to be and you're really dead set on it being there, then what you're gonna wanna do is just take some paint and outline where you think you're gonna put that garden bed and do this simple survey, but only within the perimeter of that garden. If you decide to do it in an existing garden, hopefully the results are good. Number 5, don't forget to mulch. One of my favorite mulches to use is, of course, straw. Straw does a fantastic job at covering your soil, retaining moisture, preventing weeds, as well as, once it breaks down, adding some much needed organic matter into your soil. Some other forms of mulch include leaves. Some people like to use hay. However, I do like to stay away from hay for the concern of weed seed being in it. If you have a good trusted source of hay, then you can use hay, but I prefer to stay away from it. I think I said leaves. Wood chips. This is one that gets highly missed. Often people are worried about nitrogen sequestration. We've used heavy wood chipping in the past. It works great with pretty much no problems. Of course, plastic mulch is another good option too, or some sort of woven fabric. It does a really good job at keeping your weeds away. You don't get the benefit of adding the organic matter back to your soil like you would with a green mulch, but it is a good option. As always, don't forget to hit that follow button, and don't forget to post a picture of your growing space on Instagram and give me a tag in it. I'd love to see it.